confirmation about the audio, please, guys, if the audio is clear and available. Thank you. So, yesterday, we had been looking at the portion of forest, the natural vegetation across the country, and we also happened to look at the portion of soil. Now, we have taken a look at the distribution of different types of forest resources, different type of soil across the various different parts of the country. And eventually, we discussed about what is the fertility of the soil and why it is very important to conserve the top layer of the soil. That is again something that we had discussed. Now, after that, we initiated the discussion about soil erosion. What do we understand by erosion of the soil? Erosion of the soil is what we studied as the removal of the topmost layer of the soil. It can happen by any forces of nature, rainfall, river action, wind action, any of them can carry out soil erosion, provided the soil is not bound together due to lack of vegetation. If the soil is loose, the topsoil is available to be carried away. So we looked at the various different types of soil erosion. What is it that we are going to study today, though? Today we are going to look into the portion of soil degradation, desertification, soil conservation, and then we will move on into the portion of agriculture. So here, the term in itself, soil degradation. What do we understand by this? Soil degradation. So the quality of whichever kind of soil that you have around you, you would have seen that generally the soil, they will support different types of plants. But in certain areas, due to degradation or a declining quality of the soil, it is unable to support the life forms in its own present state. So that is the case of soil degradation. It can happen due to erosion of soil itself, or it can happen because of the decline in quality. In terms of when we say the quality of soil has declined, we basically refer to the draining out of nutrients. The nutrients in that region have been drained out. That is when we say that the soil quality has actually declined. So here, soil degradation can happen. What is it? It is the decline in soil fertility. When the nutritional status declines and the depth of the soil goes down due to erosion. So both of them, soil erosion also and decline in fertility, both of them will lead to the decline in quality of the soil. Soil erosion as well as decline in quality. Quality here refers to fertility, its nutritional availability. So we have already taken a look at why this soil erosion happens. But why is it that this decline in fertility will happen? What are the factors which lead to the decline in fertility of the soil? So when we talk about the causes here, which leads to the decline in soil fertility, you will come across various different causes. What will be the causes for soil decline in soil fertility? First, let's suppose land and soil pollution. That will significantly degrade the quality of soil that you have. Land and soil pollution. Then after that, over irrigation. That leads to formation of saline soil. In various different areas, you have the formation of saline soil, right? Then leads to saline soil. Then over application of fertilizers. Excessive use of fertilizers. So ideally, the basic logic would tell you what? That in order to augment the fertility of the soil, in order to improve the fertility of the soil, apply some fertilizers, the soil will be better. But in that pursuit, many of the farmers, what they end up doing is that the logic is there also very linear, that last year I applied 4 kg of urea, I got, let's suppose, 50 kg of rice. This year I will apply 10 kg of urea, maybe I'll get 100 kg of rice. But sadly, that is not how it works. When you excessively apply fertilizer in the soil, it kills off all the microbes, organic nutrients, etc. in the soil. It oversaturates the soil with certain types of compounds, and then the soil is not fertile anymore. So that is where we have significantly altered the fertility of the soil, especially in the green revolution areas of the country, that is Punjab, Haryana, Western UP. There we have altered that by continuous over application of fertilizers. Now, amongst the fertilizers, you have NPK, nitrogen or nitrate, phosphate, and potash. It is advisable that these should be applied in the ratio of 4:2:1. Okay. By the way, I understand there would be quite significant number of you who would have thought that today is a CSAT lecture and would be absolutely puzzled to your guts right now that in the name of CSAT, what is being taught about soil degradation and soil erosion. If that would have been the case, I would never have appeared for UPSC. So please understand, the today and tomorrow we are going to have the geography sessions, the extended form of the geography sessions. Whatever lecture was scheduled for today or tomorrow, as has been announced previously also, has been shifted from Monday onwards. Okay, so before you start expecting me to give you numericals about soil and talk about the various different aspects, that okay, what is the diameter, what is the perimeter, and etc., this is just to have that grounding for you also, that this is nowhere a part of CSAT. So please don't expect CSAT questions to be asking you about soil degradation, etc. This is just an extension of geography. Okay, I hope that will provide some relief to many of you. Okay. Now, so basically, coming back to it, when we talk about the fertilizers to be applied, always the fertilizers, they are advisable to be applied in the ratio of 4:2:1. That is, for your 1 unit of potash, it is suggested that apply 2 units of phosphate and 4 units of nitrates or urea. Now, urea is available at a very subsidized rate, significantly subsidized, obviously, because the farmers need that urea. So, you will not believe that in reality, if you observe, and Down to Earth magazine basically had carried out a detailed study, and as per the ministry sources itself, it published that article where it said that in many areas in Punjab, the ratio for the application of fertilizer is close to around 36:8:1. Think about it. So for every 1 unit of potash, there are people who are putting in 36 units of urea and 8 units of potash, 8 units of phosphate. So it is clearly a situation of over application. Then also in Haryana also doesn't do much better in that case. In Haryana, it is as per around 27.5:6:1. So that is where the problem lies. So in these regions of Green Revolution had basically talked about the very basic parameters that look, as farmers, if you want to increase the productivity, apply irrigation. For that, we are providing you electricity. We are providing you the canal network. Apply the irrigated water so that the crops don't dry out, and apply fertilizers. Oh, now 1970s and 1980s, and up till the mid 1990s even, that saw the real yield of green revolution. Now, continuously, what the farmers would do was there would be a continuous growing of rice and wheat, rice and wheat. Punjab receives very little amount of rainfall. In the region of Punjab, it is one of those areas where the monsoon reaches almost at the latest point across the country and withdraws amongst the earliest areas. So Punjab is not at all ideal for growth or cultivation of rice. But irrigation was provided, electricity was provided free of cost. So the people would irrigate the land, grow rice there. Now, continuous rice and wheat cycle, it did not allow the soil to regain its natural fertility, due to which what happened? The soil's productivity started declining. Year after year, the amount of produce that the soil would give you, that started declining. So people would compensate that with more fertilizers. And those of you associated with any form of agriculture, you would always attest to the fact that when you apply more fertilizers, you need to be able to irrigate more. You need to provide more water. For that fertilizer to be digested, absorbed, you need to apply more amount of water there. So basically what would happen is, you would apply more fertilizers, you would apply more water. The supply, the crop production, the yield per hectare would remain as per the previous year. Maybe slightly it would increase, but it would not increase quite significantly, because natural processes of regaining the fertility of the soil, that was not followed. Crop diversification was not followed. Only rice and wheat, rice and wheat, rice and wheat. Why? Because these are the ones which yield you highest MSPs. MSP you would have studied in economy in significant detail. So as a result of that, there not only has the soil turned very saline, but over application of fertilizers has killed all the organic nutrients. And understand, this is a land which for millennia, I'm not talking about few years or few decades, I'm not even talking about few centuries. Open up the book of history. For millennia, since the Indus Valley civilization, since the Harappan civilization, this would be the land, the Green Revolution area that I'm talking about, Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, and even parts of the Punjab, which is in Pakistan now. This would be the agriculturally rich areas, which would produce almost any and every type of crop through the year. Within 2 to 3 decades, we have turned that region into very infertile situation. So what was the scenario for thousands of years? Where for thousands of years, civilizations have basically depended on the agricultural produce of that area. That region has now turned infertile, and there is a danger, a risk of that region being turned into even a desert. So that is how degradation of soil can happen, because of over irrigation, excessive use of fertilizers. Another aspect, lack of crop diversification or crop rotation. Basically, after growing wheat or rice, let's suppose if you grow pulses or peas, any kind of leguminous plants, I hope you are aware that in the root nodules, they will have certain symbiotic microbes which will fix the atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, convert that atmospheric nitrogen into ammonium ions, which can then be absorbed by the root nodules, which will then be supplied to the plant and will be helpful for the growth of the plant. But if you don't grow them, if you continue to extract the fertility of the soil will degrade, right? So this was another factor. Then after that, shifting cultivation then, for example, when we talk about jhum farming, and here, see, many of you will come across multiple sources. Some of them will tell you that jhum farming for some extent is good for the soil. Even stubble burning, I will put under the same category. But I want you to understand this in detail. So there are always certain voices which will tell you that, look, burning that you do in these areas of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, where you burn the residues of the rice harvest, that is what causes all the pollution. Now they will tell you that it is beneficial for the soil at the local level. Is it or is it not? So there are both aspects to it, even for the case of shifting cultivation. What is that shifting cultivation or jhum farming that we are talking about? Jhum farming is a method of shifting cultivation. Jhum farming is actually observed in the hilly tracts in the tribal areas of the country, where due to lack of infrastructure, due to lack of institutional support, what people do is they apply an absolute traditional method of crop cultivation. So, in order to cultivate the crops, and there they grow crops only to feed themselves and their family members. They don't grow crops that I will go to the nearest mandi, sell these crops and make a profit. No, it is for self-consumption. So they will be dependent only on natural rain, fertility of the soil, etc. So what they will do, in order to clear a forested land, they will cut down the trees in that area. They will burn the remaining residues, and then the land will be cleared, which they will then use for growth of plants. Now, there also you burn the residues. In stubble burning also you burn the residues. What is the benefit of this burning? So many of the times the soil has got certain amount of rodents and pests, right? For example, various different types of mice, rats, etc. They are present. So when you plant the seeds, many of the times they will consume the seeds. So that is why people prefer to burn that region, so that all those rats, rodents, etc., they either move out or they are killed. But the problem here is that upon application of so much amount of heat, the soil in that area not only loses moisture, it gets hardened, it gets compact. When you heat it up, the soil almost starts baking, it gets compacted. And when the soil gets compacted, then neither air nor water can penetrate into the lower layers. That will lead to a long run infertility developing in the soil layer. Okay, so that is why in the long run, it leads to soil compaction and eventual decline in fertility. So here, you can write about stubble burning also. Both of these leads to compaction of soil. Okay. So other than soil erosion, these are the factors which would eventually lead to the degradation of the soil. Now, this degradation of the soil has the potential to cause even what is referred to as desertification. So, what is this desertification? So, desertification for a long period of time was understood as the expansion of the existing desert areas. That was thought to be desertification. For a long period of time, it was thought to be expansion of the existing desert areas. But what does that mean? So let's suppose this is your Thar Desert. If the Thar Desert is expanding in this region, if the Thar Desert is further expanding in this region, so there is desertification which is happening. Okay, where the sand is carried by the wind, there is wind erosion, that desert sand is then deposited all over the region of the farmlands, etc. So there you will have sandy soil, will not be able to support crops. But now, upon subsequent research and findings, the world has agreed to the reality that desertification is not only the expansion of the existing desert areas, soil degradation can also lead to desertification. How? So, degradation also causes desertification. And it is very simple. Why and how? First of all, if the soil in a region is degraded, means what? Ability to support natural vegetation goes. Ability to support natural vegetation that immediately goes out of the window. Okay. Now, as a result of that, if in an area natural vegetation is not there, an area is left a bit barren, can we say that the water cycle of that region will get impacted? Because the leaves of the trees, etc., they consistently keep on supplying that moisture into the air, and the air and the atmosphere returns it as rainfall. If there is not any of them being supplied in the air, then you can think that even rainfall can't bring it back, right? So here disturbs the water cycle of the area, increasing the number of dry days. And this is dry days as in less rainfall, not the dry days as in 26th of January and 2nd of October. This is basically less rainfall, those dry days. Then after this, topsoil remains barren. When the topsoil remains barren, then is eroded, soil erosion, and subsoil is exposed. Subsoil is always large grained. In dry conditions, it becomes sandy in texture. Infertile subsoil in dry conditions. Why dry conditions? Because of this factor. Conditions become sandy and then leads to formation of desert or expansion of a desertified land. Okay, so that is how even soil degradation can eventually lead to desertification. I hope this is clear. Will you be able to write an answer if the question is asked that why desertification occurs? How can soil degradation lead to desertification? Will we be able to write an answer in that? Any doubts in that? Good. Because this was a question asked by UPSC in the mains examination. So I hope that there won't be any difficulty. Water cycle, basically understand that in any area, if you don't have forest, if you don't have natural vegetation, then what will happen is that there will be a loss of, see, whenever you have trees or forests, by the process of transpiration, they will continuously end up supplying moisture into the atmosphere. Water vapor in the atmosphere will lead to eventual formation of clouds in that area, will bring rainfall. But if you don't have vegetation or forest in an area, that supply of moisture gets disturbed. Then you are only dependent that the monsoon winds, if they are strong enough, or the monsoon winds, if they are moist enough, they will bring you rainfall. Otherwise, they will be dry in itself. Okay, so that is where you have the situation where if you remove or deforest an area, that water cycle gets distorted. You don't get that regular supply of moisture or the regular occurrence of rainfall. Rainfall will happen, but rainfall will happen in a very distorted manner. Earlier it might have been the case that, let's suppose, in a month if you receive 10 centimeter of rainfall, it would always be that in 3 days 1 centimeter distributed, again in the next 3 days 1 centimeter again. So the soil would be able to absorb that also and retain it also. Now what is happening is, as a result of deforestation, in 1 month still you will receive 10 centimeter, but not distributed every 3 days. Maybe on the 10th day you will suddenly receive 5 centimeter of rainfall. It will flood the entire area, carry away the soil, etc. Then again next 20 days will be dry, and again 30th day you might receive 5 centimeter of rainfall again. This is something that you would have experienced. If you ask even your older generation or recall from your childhood days, now you will observe a clear-cut departure in the pattern of rainfall in our country, particularly in the northeastern states and in the central portion of the country as well, where earlier during the rainy season, if you recall from your childhood days, you would have experienced regular occurrence of rainfall every few days. Nowadays, even during the monsoon season, you will observe that there are large number of dry days, no rainfall, where you yourself are left pondering that everybody is saying the monsoon has come, whereas the monsoon, it is not bringing rainfall, at least to my location. So large number of dry days, and one fine day it will rain. It will rain cats and dogs. It will rain so heavy that it will end up inundating and flooding your region. Again, that will give you the expectation, okay, now the rainfall has arrived, now it will improve. Again, dry days for 10 days or 5 days. So that pattern of rainfall, that has got distorted. Amount of rainfall is same, but that distribution has got distorted. As a result of that, the whenever these floodings happen, they will always carry the loose soil. If you have less amount of rainfall, soil is able to absorb it, is able to digest it. Okay. Can it happen that groundwater rise and it can damage the soil? No. Sometimes saline conditions are created there. For example, in the region of the Indira Gandhi Canal, there what has happened is that in the region of Punjab and Haryana, there has been so much over exploitation of the groundwater that the groundwater has become very contaminated. It has got various different heavy metals, etc. Now, with the flow of water towards region of Rajasthan with the help of the Indira Gandhi Canal, that has induced a movement in that groundwater region as well to some degree. And that has ended up reaching the areas of Rajasthan, making that area also saline. So salinity can be transferred by the groundwater into the soil, but it won't be the case about other nutrients. That much is not the case. But yes, in principle, salinity can be transferred from one region to another, as has been observed in the case of the Indira Gandhi Canal and particularly in the region of Punjab and Haryana. Okay. Now, then we come to soil conservation. So basically, if we are aware that how a soil can get destroyed, how the quality of the soil can get distorted, etc., automatically we will be able to deduce that how the soil can be conserved. So, how do you observe the removal of the topsoil or degradation of quality? Soil erosion or soil degradation. If you prevent that, that is conservation of soil. So, for soil erosion, let's suppose, in order to prevent soil erosion, what do you need? Vegetation. Soil should not be left barren. At every point of time, you need some crop or the other. Plus, When you have an agent of nature, such as, let's suppose, the rainfall coming down the slope of a hill or a mountain, it will gather so much pace that it will carry a lot of soil along with it. So you have to lower the pace. How do you do that? So in these hilly tracts, hilly terrains, you carve out terraces, terrace farming, terrace cultivation, what is also known as contour terracing. Contour refers to sinuous lines, right? So contour terracing, for example. So in this way, what will happen? The speed of flow will be substantially reduced. So now the water will not have that much speed that it will drag away all the topsoil along with it. So soil erosion can be prevented. There is also contour bunding. A bund is constructed. What is a bund? It is a physical barrier, artificial physical barrier that you construct with the help of some amount of soil. You create a kind of an artificial barrier. So let's suppose you have a hilly area where during the rains, the water comes down with very great speed and it tends to carry all the topsoil along with it. Let's suppose that is the condition in this hilly area. Now, what you can do is you can construct some artificial bunds here and here. How will they look like? So they, on a cross-sectional view, they will look somewhat like this. So what purpose is solved by this is, yes, like speed breakers on the road. Very good. So what purpose will be solved? So when you have, let's suppose, rainfall and water starts to flow, before the water is able to gather momentum, the water is allowed to lay stable and accumulate in this area. Then, when the water stays and accumulates in the region, some part of it will percolate and recharge the groundwater. Only when the water exceeds this level will the water start dripping and moving. But by this time, the speed of water has reduced. Again, slowly and steadily, the water will start accumulating here. Again, only if it will overflow will the water come down. So this reduces the speed of flow. That is bunding. That is what is contour bunding. So contour bunding, contour terracing, regulated forestry. There is no better way to preserve or conserve the soil in an area other than having natural vegetation in that area. Okay. Controlled grazing, so that overgrazing does not happen. Many of the times the animals, they basically remove the top layer of the grass itself. The soil becomes very, very barren. Then cover cropping. What is cover cropping? So let's suppose you have grown rice. After that, you have grown wheat. After harvesting of wheat, you have again grown rice. Now, in many areas, wheat you will harvest in the month of March. Rice you will sow at the end of June or maybe in July. So April, May and June, many of the farmers, they leave their soil barren. Now, when the soil is left barren, it will be exposed to huge amount of heat. That will lead to compaction of the soil. All the moisture will be drained out. Organic materials will get killed. Or if there is a strong wind movement, that barren topsoil can be carried away as well. So rather than leaving the soil barren in between the various crops, grow something on the soil, anything. It might not be a greater food crop for that matter. Grow, for example, certain kind of veggies, spinaches, etc. So that the soil is bounded in its own place and it is not exposed to the vagaries of nature. That is cover cropping. You cover the soil so that no barren layer is left behind. Then mixed farming, right? We will study about mixed farming, crop rotation, and also you can carry out the process of mulching, which we will study in the portion of agriculture. Okay, so crop rotation, etc. That will, if in crop rotation you grow leguminous plants, that will always end up augmenting the fertility of the soil. Okay, now we come to the portion of agriculture. If we carry out desiltation, can we deposit? If we carry out desiltification, can we deposit in the Punjab region, making it fertile? No. The problem of declining fertility in the region of Punjab is not because of siltation. If you are talking about desalination, that is a different thing. In the region of Punjab, what is required at the earnest, in the urgent case, is diversification of the crops. That is a region which cannot support crops such as sugarcane. That is a region which cannot support, unless and until you excessively irrigate that area, which is also declining the level of, reducing the level of groundwater, making the topsoil also saline. So basically, you should not grow sugarcane, rice. These should never be grown in regions of Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP. Because for sugarcane, rice, etc., ideally 120 centimeter of rainfall to 130 centimeter of rainfall per year, that is the requirement. These regions receive how much? 50 to 70 centimeter of rainfall. Thorn forest is a natural vegetation of that area. And think about it, you are growing crops which require the conditions of a moist deciduous. So there is a large disparity, due to which what is happening? Everybody has installed tube wells, right? Pumps. There is large scale subsidy which is provided for electricity. Fair enough. Now, the tube wells keep on running endlessly. That depletes the soil underground level, also underground water level. So now the underground water in those areas, at one point of time, those underground waters would be the source of life. Those underground waters now contain cadmium, zinc, lead, even uranium in the case of Punjab. So first of all, you need to grow the crops such as wheat, pulses, maize, cotton, millets, oil seeds. There are many such crops. Vegetables, for example. If you grow vegetables, your income can be significantly increased by at least 10 to 12 times. Provided you grow vegetables in the large area, you need proper care in that also. But that has got the potential. So if you do that, you do carry out crop rotation, grow pulses also, grow the leguminous plants also, augment the fertility. Only then will it be recharged over a period of time. If you continue to grow the same crops, that cannot be recharged. Can excess runoff due to rainfall cause degradation? Yes, absolutely. That will cause erosion. Erosion is a form of degradation. How contours control the water flow? They're like steps. So basically, think about it. If you have a structure somewhat like this, and if you have a structure like this, water will always end up gaining momentum in the straight flow. Here, water will accumulate here for some time. Then it will flow over. Here also, it will start accumulating over here. Only when it overflows that area, only then it will drip over. Then again, it will accumulate. So like that, the speed of water flow will not be able to gain that momentum or the inertia to carry the topsoil. So that is why contour terracing or terrace farming is advantageous. Plateau areas follow this cultivation mostly, like in Ayodhya Hills, I've seen. Which kind of cultivation are we talking about, Ankush? Terrace. If we follow crop cover, then there is no pest for soil, then soil fertility, no rest for soil. Then soil fertility may reduce. Grow those kind of crops which will enrich the soil fertility. Apply manures, don't apply fertilizers, because those cover cropping. You are not fighting, you would have left the soil barren in those days. So you are growing something, so obviously you are not concerned about the high productivity. Apply natural manures. Allow the soil to regain fertility by the application of manures themselves. They will be able to, for example, spinaches. You have one of the wheats that is bathua, which is a kind of a spinach. So grow that. So that will, if you apply manures, it will protect the top layer of the soil. Okay. It does not mean that the soil requires some amount of rest. It will also give you rest after you harvest that. But it is absolutely disastrous to leave the topsoil barren. When you leave the topsoil exposed, that is when the topsoil can always be carried away or degraded. Okay. Yes, steppe cultivation is observed mostly in the hilly areas, mostly in the hills, particularly even in the region of West Bengal. If you go to the northern part in the hills, in the northeastern state, southern China for that matter, significantly has augmented its rice productivity by this process. So that is the case. Now, we come to the topic of agriculture, which is going to be relevant both for your prelims as well as for your mains examination. So here for your prelims, the questions that will be asked. Here also keep an eye and ear out for the portion of current affairs. So in the portion of prelims, the questions will be ranging from the areas of types of crops or types of cultivation, cropping pattern, cropping seasons, then after that, crops, conditions required, okay, then also organic farming, and areas in news. Newer techniques, irrigation practices, etc. These are the portions which are relevant for your prelims examination. So always I would advise that either ways, many of you would have been suggested to read the Down to Earth magazine online edition. You get free. You can read online basically the articles you can browse through. So, for example, those Down to Earth magazines, etc., that you read, just go through that. The latest editions about agriculture, anything in news, chances are that can be relevant for your portion of either environment or the portion of agriculture. In the mains examination, mains here is asked in GS paper 3. GS paper 3. Now here, issues in agriculture. For this, you will have to combine the portions that you have studied in economy about the issues faced in agriculture. You have to combine it with the portion of geography as well. Then after that, basically, organic farming, right? And learnings from Green Revolution, increase in farm income. These are the areas from where questions are asked and have been asked. Now, agriculture is coming under increased focus. In the past few years, in UPSC also for almost the last decade that you will observe, both in the optional areas as well as in the general studies portion, you'll find increased amount of questions being asked from the area of agriculture, almost a decade and a half now. And that is because the agricultural sector in our country, that has been witnessing a real fall in terms of the farm income. The agricultural growth of the country is somewhere around 2 to 3%. On a national level, on an average, if you consider it for the past couple of decades, it can be considered to be around 3 to 4%. But the agricultural income is declining. The yield per hectare, that how much crop you are producing per farmland, that is also reducing. The farm income is not increasing. The income of the worker class or the working class in rest of the sectors, in industries, etc., that is increasing. Over a period of years, that has increased. But for the agricultural laborers and the farmers, the problem are persistent. So that is why UPSC has been asking questions about agriculture. It is stressing upon that. Why? Because even today, approximately 50% of our population, of our labor force, almost more than 50%. Certain data pointers will tell you 53%, certain will tell you 47%, certain will go up till the extent of 55%. Almost 50% of our labor force is still directly or indirectly involved in agriculture. So if there is an issue in agriculture, it has got the potential to damage, the potential to influence a large section of the population. That is why here this sector gains so much importance. Now, when we talk about Indian agriculture, I always say that for all of you, from your childhood days, you would have read this statement multiple times, written this statement hundreds of times. India is an agrarian country. Whenever in your younger days, in third standard, fourth standard, you would have been asked to write, in those standards, you are supposed to write small essays, which you rectify beforehand, and you simply go and vomit in the exam that my favorite festival, or my best friend, or the favorite monument, or something like that. India also, most of the essays are about, write an essay about India. So most of you would have written that India is an agrarian country. Not understanding what it is, you would have rectified it from somewhere and you would have written agrarian country. Means agriculture is the mainstay. Cultivation is the mainstay. So if agriculture and cultivation, they are the mainstay of the economic setup, then why is this facing a problem? So we have to take the clock back for certain number of years. Historically, if you take a look at this particular region of the world, this has been agriculturally very productive. That has been the reason for the rise of various different kingdoms across the various parts of the country, from Cholas in the south to the various different kingdoms in the north, from the Nandas to the Mauryas to the various different Guptas, all of them, to the invaders, the Turkish invaders, etc., who came in, the Khaljis, the Tughlaqs, all of them, they relied on the agricultural system, the agricultural setup to give them revenue. And at that point of time, the agriculture would be pretty much subsistence based. That the farmers would go grow crops primarily for themselves, some amount of excess they would sell in the market, and then they would do their living with that. The Britishers came in. When the Britishers came in, they brought in new methods of agriculture. In this form, they brought in indigo cultivation, cash crop cultivation, etc., due to which there was a significant scarcity of food grains in the country. In the 1700s and 1800s and up till 1947, you would have studied it more than me in the portion of modern history. India was plagued with various different types of famines where the crops would fail and there would be lack of food, absolute lack of food. Famine caused starvation would lead to deaths. As per the estimates, in fact, Nowadays, the name is very controversial. But in those days, if you even take a look at the historical letters and the journals published by Savarkar, now Savarkar, he picked up this entire idea of large section of population getting punished under the British rule. He brought about this fact and figure that up till 1890s, India had witnessed close to around 20 million people being lost due to lack of food. 20 to 30 million people. That was as per Savarkar's writing. Think about it. If you have 20 to 30 million people, means how many? 2 to 3 crore people dying because of lack of food in only a span of 100 years. We are not talking about centuries here. We are not talking about generations. We are talking about a small time period. Everybody talks about Holocaust and what Hitler did. Fair enough. That was as bad as it can get. And many of the people were killed just because of their racial and ethnic origin or allegiance. Now, the Britishers, up till the 1890s, managed to kill almost 4 to 5 times the number of people, almost, as was experienced in World War II by Hitler in the concentration camps. Then in the 1900s, again, these starvation deaths were very common because we lacked the food production. The famine of Bengal in 1943 in itself was responsible for the death of close to around, the approximation tells you that around 30 to 40 lakh people lost their life. So, when India became independent, India was staring at a massive food crisis. We had been impoverished. Average life expectancy was close to 30 years. So we were staring at a substantial food crisis. Now, in this scenario of that food crisis, what was the approach? What was the outcome of that? What was the solution? We were dependent on foreign aid because we did not have money to buy food from some other country to even import. We were dependent on foreign aid. Ships carrying wheat grains would leave US harbors. They would sail towards India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And the people of the subcontinent would rejoice that now we will have food security for at least the next couple of months. That would be the regular scenario. That would be the regular cases. Now, in that situation, the country was almost laggard in all the food crops. We did not have enough milk supply, nothing. Many of the times, we had to agree to foreign policy matters as per the whims and the fantasies of the US government, just because we were dependent on the grant of food from the US. From the 60s onwards, Green Revolution came in. Green Revolution was implemented in certain parts of the country, whereby an increase in the amount of food grain production could be observed. If you carry out certain processes, you encourage growth of high yielding variety of seeds, you encourage irrigation, provide rural electrification, provide fertilizers, carry out land reform so that everybody gets some land to cultivate, provide microfinancing. From that time onwards, from the 70s onwards, we started producing more food. From that time till today, if you take a look at it today, India is almost amongst the largest producers of almost all types of food grains. We are either the largest or the second largest producer of any kind of food grain. Okay, either the largest or the second largest, or amongst the top five. We have not only become self sufficient in terms of food production, we are amongst the major exporters of food items across the globe. So much so that last year, that is in 2022, when India basically put a ban on wheat export, the world prices took a hit. When India supplies sugar in the world prices they take a hit. So we are an important constitution and an important member of the global supply chain of agriculture. Our agricultural exports today are close to the range of around $50 billion per year. The gross value addition by the agricultural sector in our economy is close to around $300 billion. Our annual food grain production is more than 300 million metric tons. Our annual horticultural production, that is fruits and vegetables, exceeds 300 million metric tons. We are the largest supplier of milk and milk products, largest producers of milk and milk products across the globe. We have gained tremendously. And it would be absolutely unfair for us to think about the agricultural sector as a problem without celebrating the peaks that this agricultural sector has achieved. But then why are we worried about agriculture if everything is so good? Here, we still face the reality that the agricultural incomes over the past few decades have been falling continuously. We still face the reality that close to 50% of the population generates only 15% of economic output. Agriculture as a whole is going to support only 14 to 15% of the GDP. Right? So there are inefficiencies, there are deficiencies that needs improvement, and hence this is the portion which is required. Okay? Now, here, basically, when we take a look at this portion of agriculture, more than 50% of the population is involved. Gross value addition is close to around $270 billion. Now, the exports from agricultural activities is basically to the tune of around $50 billion in itself. India is expected to have produced significant amount of food grains, more than 300 million metric tons in the years gone by. So our productivity has increased. Okay. Now, when we talk about the types of agriculture, so you have the classification of agriculture into various different types: primitive subsistence, intensive subsistence, and the types of commercial farming. Here you will hear about the term of subsistence. What do we mean by subsistence? So whenever you come across the term subsistence, it is basically cultivation for own consumption. Cultivation for self-consumption. Okay, cultivation of grains for the self-consumption. So you are not focused on excessive production here. I am referring Down to Earth YouTube channel. Is that okay, or should I go? Go for the online edition of Down to Earth. Read it. Reading is often going to give you many of the data pointers. YouTube also you can see, but not all the articles of Down to Earth are represented by the YouTube channel. Now, then when we talk about these different types of farming or agricultural methods, let us see what do we mean by that. Primitive subsistence. So primitive, very traditional methodology of carrying out cultivation, very traditional. No modern tools, technologies are used. Weather forecasting, irrigation, fertilizer, nothing is used. Rainfall for water supply, fertility of the soil to support the crops. That's it. So that is the case of primitive subsistence farming. Now here, when we talk about this primitive subsistence farming, it is basically carried out in a small piece of land using very basic tools and techniques. Very, very basic tools and techniques. Right. So here, food produced is chiefly for self-consumption. Mostly the modus operandi is shifting type of agriculture. What is shifting type? So you clear the land in one area, then you grow crops here. For 2 to 3 seasons or 2 to 3 years, you will grow crops. After 2 to 3 years, the soil will start becoming infertile. You move to a new area, you clear the land in that area, and then you grow crops there. After 2 to 3 years, again, when this becomes infertile, again you shift somewhere else, and again you do the same process. So that is the shifting way of cultivation. Okay, so it is heavily dependent on natural resources. One method of shifting type of cultivation is jhum farming. Now, in this case of primitive subsistence, the overall produce will be very less. Overall produce will be significantly less, very less. Now, in this situation, when the overall produce is less, the farmers generally have to take care of some of the other processes as well, some of the other activities as well, such as hunting and gathering, beekeeping, fishing, in order to feed or fulfill their own requirements. So they need to carry out a supportive economic practice as well. Okay. So here, when we take a look at the shifting type of agriculture, first of all, let us analyze. So you have jhum cultivation, a kind of a shifting cultivation. It is also what is slash and burn. Slash and burn, why the name slash and burn? Because you cut down the forest in that area, you burn the residue, and you clear the land and grow crops in that area. That is why slash and burn, and then you grow crops. Here, it is a kind of a migratory primitive agriculture where you shift the farmland in itself. Land is cleared with traditional tools and cultivated for a few years. As the fertility declines, land is abandoned in favor of another freshly cleared patch. Cereals and tubers are grown. Hunting, gathering, fishing, and bird rearing, these are also observed. Latin America, tropical Africa, tropical regions of South and Southeast Asia, these are the areas where you will observe this shifting cultivation. Then you have intensive subsistence farming. Intensive subsistence. Now, again, this is a form of cultivation widely followed wherever the land is very fertile. So you're dependent upon the absolute fertility of the land. So, for example, in the river valleys, in the deltas, where you have fertile alluvial soil, people carry out this process of cultivation. Very labor intensive. Almost every member of the family will be directly or indirectly involved in the crop cultivation. So the areas of intensive subsistence cultivation, generally they will be very densely populated because everybody would want to grow crops in these alluvial soil areas. Very densely populated. So here, river valleys and delta plains in South and Southeast Asia, small farms due to very high population density, dominance of food crops, especially rice, high intensity of land use means every bit of land is utilized. Shreyas, modus operandi is the method of operation. The process, how do you carry that out? That is modus operandi. Okay. So high intensity of land use, labor intensive, all the labor force of the family is deployed there. Traditional methods like crop rotation, mixed cropping, etc., that is done to maintain the fertility of the soil. Okay. Very low level of commercialization due to a very small surplus, almost a negligible surplus. So you have absolutely negligible level of commercialization. Then you have commercial farming, where you grow crops only for the profit motive. So when you grow crops only for profit motive, generally you will grow the same type of crop over a very large land area. You will deploy all the modern machinery, all the modern techniques. You will require very cheap labor force. But initially, you have to invest much more irrigation facilities you have to provide so that the best quality of crops grow. Only then will you be able to earn profit. Right? So, single crop is grown on a large land holding, very large acres of land, only one type of crop cultivation. Even tea, coffee plantations, they come under commercial farming. Right, highly nowadays in Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, the growth of rice and wheat over large farmlands is commercial farm. It is capital intensive. Initially, you have to put in a lot of investment for various different machineries, etc. Yes, cash crops are primarily grown. So here, processing, post processing, crop processing, food processing infrastructure. For example, let's suppose you grow wheat. Now, when you harvest wheat, it comes with all the residues. So the grain separator, etc., these are processing infrastructure. If you provide them, these areas will thrive. Labor intensive as well. Now, in certain parts of the world, this commercial farming takes a next level where you will observe commercial livestock and grain farming as well. Here, what does happen in many parts, for example, in the region of Northwestern Europe, Eastern North America, parts of erstwhile USSR means the previous region of USSR, that is in the present area of Ukraine, Russia, etc., Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania. In those areas, the land is so very large, you carry out crop cultivation, plus you also carry out animal husbandry, rearing of animals. So rearing of animals plus crop cultivation, that is what is mixed farming. So equal emphasis is laid on crop cultivation and animal husbandry. That is what is referred to as mixed farming. Now here, you'll find various crops like wheat, barley, oats, rye, and fodder. They will be observed. Animals like cattle, sheep, pigs, and poultry. They will be very prominent. Intensive use of land. Every bit and pieces of land are utilized. High level of modernization and commercialization of the land will be observed. Then high amount of capital expenditure on the various agrochemicals, pesticides, etc. Everything will be observed in this case. Crop rotation and intercropping, they are very common. So this is the different type of cultivation observed across the world. Now we come to what is referred to as cropping pattern. That is how, in what arrangement are the crops grown. So when we talk about cropping pattern, arrangement or pattern followed for the growth of crops. Now, here, broadly, if you will classify, you have two types. One is what is known as monocropping. Other is multi-cropping. Now, what do we mean by monocropping and multi-cropping here? Monocropping, the name in itself tells you, one type of crop you grow in the farmland through the year. After that, maybe you leave the land barren or you grow the same crop again. So, single crop, very good, grown in the year. Multi-cropping, multiple crops are grown in the same farm throughout the year. So this multi-cropping is achieved by various different ways. This multi-cropping, it can be done by a process which is known as intercropping, or let me use a different scale here. Intercropping. What is intercropping? So for intercropping, let's suppose you have a farmland. Simultaneously, you are growing multiple crops, maybe rice or wheat, along with that oil seeds, along with that maybe some vegetables, maybe some legumes. But you're not growing them randomly. You are growing them in fixed rows. Let's suppose here you are growing rice, then maybe even a couple of rows of rice you are growing. Then after that, you are dedicating a couple of rows to vegetation, vegetables. Then after that, maybe a couple of rows or one row for leguminous plant or maybe a millet. Then again, maybe rice. Then again, maybe vegetable. Then again, something else. So what are you doing here? You are basically growing crops, different types of crops, in fixed row pattern. In definite arrangement in a certain row pattern, you are growing the crops. That is intercropping. Okay, simultaneously you are growing multiple crops, but in a fixed row pattern. Then you have what is known as mixed cropping. This is different from mixed farming. That is mixed cropping. So when you have mixed cropping, in that what is done? In that case, you don't have any such definite row pattern arrangement. Let's suppose you are growing rice in a particular area, then maybe in certain other area you are growing vegetables, then maybe pulses or grams here, then maybe some other kind here, then maybe another kind of crop here. So you don't observe a definite row pattern or an arrangement here. The crops are intermixed, right? So that is mixed cropping. Here also you are growing multiple crops. Here also you are growing multiple crops. But this is the example of mixed cropping where you don't have a definite row pattern. Here where you have a definite row pattern, that is the case of intercropping. Then you have what is known as sequence cropping. Sequence cropping. That is, you grow the crops in the sequence. This is also what is relay or ratoon cropping, where after harvesting of one crop or while you are harvesting one of the crop, immediately you start growing the next crop. So for example, rice followed by wheat, maybe followed by melons, musk melon for example, again rice. So in the same farmland, in 1 year, you are growing multiple crops, but you are growing it in a kind of a sequence. That is what is known as sequence cropping. Now, the definition of it is here. So basically, cropping pattern, you have monocropping, where monocropping or monoculture, growing of only one crop on a piece of land year after year. Multiple cropping, you grow multiple crops in the same piece of land in the same year. So it is of three types: intercropping, mixed cropping, sequence cropping. Intercropping, two or more crops simultaneously on the same piece of land with a definite row pattern. Growing of two or more crops simultaneously intermingled without any row pattern, that is mixed cropping. And two or more crops in a sequence on the same piece of land in the farming year. So basically, the sequence cropping. Now, in India, we generally observe different cropping seasons. Not all the crops are grown every time. Depending upon the climatic conditions, the amount of rainfall, etc., you have the required condition where only certain types of crops can, for example, grow. So when we talk about the cropping seasons of the country, you have the classification into three major cropping seasons: Rabi, Kharif, as well as Zaid. So when we talk about Rabi, this is also what is referred to as the winter crop. Winter crops. So here, crops are sown in generally November, December, harvested in March, April. For example, if you observe here that any particular crop which is grown in, for example, wheat, peas, etc., oil seeds, many of them, they are sown in the month of November, December, harvested in the month of March, April. That will come under the category of Rabi crops. Then you also have what is referred to as the Kharif crop. Kharif crop is what is known as the monsoon crop. It is planted after the monsoon rains. Sown in the month of June, July, later June and July mostly. Harvested in September, October. Okay. Example, cotton, rice, all these are the examples of Kharif crop. And then you have the Zaid crops, which are known as the summer crops. Summer crops, very good. Very short growing season, very short growing period here. So they are sown in the month of April, sometimes even May, and harvested in late May or even June. Mostly June is when they will be harvested. Example, watermelon, muskmelon, cucumber, these come under the category of the Zaid crops. Okay. So here, if you take a look at it, so for example, barley, wheat, peas, mustard, these are examples of Rabi. Then paddy, maize, jowar, cotton, tur, groundnut, soybean, these are examples of Kharif. Then watermelon, muskmelon, cucumber, these come under the example of Zaid. Tur is, yes, it is dal, it is pulses. So these are the examples of various different types of crops that you have. Now we'll be taking a look at few of the major types of crops and the conditions that are required for the growth and the cultivation of these crops, starting with rice. Now, rice is typically a tropical crop requiring very high amount of rainfall. So the ideal conditions of the growth for the growth of rice is high temperature. On an average, during the growing period, the temperature should be around 25 degrees Celsius or higher. And the annual average amount of rainfall should be close to around 120 centimeter per year. Average annual rainfall should be this much. However, the absolute borderline that if the rainfall quantity is less than that, rice will not grow, that is 100 centimeter. Below 100 centimeter of rainfall, rice will not grow. Now in India, especially as I was telling you about the Green Revolution states, Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, there you have had the availability of this. They don't have that much amount of rainfall. Those regions don't have that much amount of rainfall. In the 60s and the 70s itself, by the virtue of being very close to the capital of New Delhi, and also having the alluvial soil and the government at that point of time, significantly helped install electrical network in that area. Irrigation facilities were brought into that area. A lot of canals, etc., were constructed. So those areas, they started compensating for the lack of rainfall by irrigation. So that is why if you observe rice typically in our country is ideally suited for to be grown in the eastern and southeastern parts of the country and some parts of western part of Western Ghats. Those are the areas ideally suited for rice. The regions to the northwest, they are not at all suited for rice. In regions such as in Odisha, for example, the Coromandel coast, Tamil Nadu, in Assam also, the amount of rainfall availability and average temperature throughout the year is such that they grow three different varieties of rice. One after the other, they continue to grow rice. Os, Aman, Boro. So one is sown in the month of June, harvested in the month of August. Another is sown in the month of July end, harvested by the month of October and early November. And then one in the Coromandel coast, you also have a rice variety which is sown in the month of December, harvested in the month of March, April. So you have in these areas, these are the typical regions where rice should be grown, ideally suitable for growing rice. And that is something, there are multiple ways to understand that as well. So basically, if you observe, India is the second largest producer of rice after China. Production in 2020 and 2021 was around 127.93 million tons. Now, please don't think that why is he presenting the data of 2020, 2021? The data in terms of agricultural production generally have a lag of 3 years, the accurate data. The presumptive data for 2023, that is an absolute presumption. It might be absolutely false. This is a presumptive data which the US FDA has released. So they have said that this year, as per their assumption and presumption, this year in 2023, we are staring at an overall rice production of close to around 130 million tons. Okay. But what happens is first advanced estimate is arrived at, then second advanced estimate, then first revised estimate, second revised estimate, and then you have the final figure which is released. So generally there is a lag of 2 to 3 years for the actual verifiable data. Now here observe the rice growing areas. Observe these rice growing areas. You have the major areas. These are the major areas where rice is cultivated, and the rest are minor areas. The light green portion, that is the minor areas. Now, one easiest way to identify whether it is a major area for that crop cultivation or not is simply by taking a look at the staple diet of that region. Staple diet means what is normally consumed on a day-to-day basis. If you observe in the region of northwestern part of the country, that is not the rice consuming part of the country. Their rice is not consumed significantly in food, in various different meals of the day. Rice doesn't form an important constituent there. In the eastern and the southern part of the country, you will find that either during the breakfast or during the time of the lunch or during the time of the snacks or during the time of the dinner, one or the other item will be constituted with rice, or there will be presence of some or the other variety of rice. Right? So whenever you observe the staple diet of a region, you will get an idea about historically what that region has always grown, because staple diet, what you consume, is something that you have been consuming for generations now. So you get an idea that historically what that region has produced. Okay. For example, in the northwestern part of the country, what is the traditional staple diet there? Wheat. Wheat is significantly consumed, right? Wheat and other forms of wheat. You have various different types of chapatis, rotis, etc. that is consumed. In Rajasthan, for example, bajra is one of those parts of the staple diet, isn't it? Like that, So, for example, jaggery produced from sugarcane forms the part of the staple diet of food in various areas. So, those regions have historically produced sugarcane. Certain areas in the east, for example, you will find in the eastern portion of the country, you will find even in some portions of south, for example, Mangalore, Konkan belt, you will find Malabar belt, you will find fish forms a part of the daily diet, almost regular diet. So those are the regions which have always been dependent on the animal protein for the for the availability of food. Regions such as eastern UP and northern Bihar, in parts of Odisha also, but northern Bihar is that unique example where you will find a lot of fish to be consumed. Now that goes contrary to the very aspect that how can a region which is far away from the coastal area, how can that region have fish as a part of the staple diet? And the reason is very simple. Because eastern UP, northern Bihar, parts of Odisha, traditionally, historically, take any old literature of these areas, for almost 3 to 4 months of the year, these regions would be covered under flood waters, at least for 2 months. Now, when floods would be that common, obviously, fresh food would be available in the form of fish. So that is how, by staple diet, you get an idea about the historical aspect of what is grown, what has been found, and where is it that we are deviating from the natural process of food production, whether that is beneficial or does that have a detrimental effect. For example, in the region of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, growing of rice has substantially depleted the groundwater level, made the soil saline. For the growth of 1 kg of rice, you consume close to around 5,000 liters of water. If it is supplied by rainfall, fair enough. But if you are extracting the groundwater, there is nothing to justify that cost. Okay, so that is the example of unsustainable cultivation. Now, then you come to wheat. So when we talk about wheat here, wheat is a subtropical crop grown in subtropical and temperate areas, colder areas. It requires a cooler condition to grow, a slightly cooler condition to grow. Okay, so here it doesn't require high amount of rainfall, only 50 to 75 centimeter of annual rainfall, evenly distributed during the growing season. That is enough. So this is ideal to be grown in the region of the northwestern part of the country where it is grown. Okay, so here there are two important wheat growing zones, the Ganga Satluj plains in the northwest and the regions of the Deccan as well. Here, the estimated production of wheat for the year 2023 is estimated to be 112 million tons. That is the estimated production of wheat in the country. Okay, so these are the major wheat producing areas. Even you will find the countries of Central Asia, for example. Countries of Central Asia to the north of India. There also, amongst the staple diet, some or the other form of bread is consumed. The various different varieties of bread that we consume, the naans and the kulchas, etc., that we consume, that is, not all of them have an Indian origin. If you are interested about the history of food, you get to know about many of the things about where the food has been brought about. And that gives you an idea about the traditional cultivation of that area. So in the region, for example, when you have all these tandoor baked breads, all of that is derived from the region of Central Asia, wheat growing area. Right. So those areas you will also find wheat in significant consumption. Ukraine, for example, Russia, wheat growing region, the wheat basket of the Europe, that is the region of Ukraine, the region of Russia, Western Russia, that is. Okay. So that is the case of wheat. Is climate change affecting wheat production? Absolutely, yes. It is impacting wheat production. Why? Because, see, when you talk about wheat, So it requires a cool growing condition. We have discussed about this even during the time of discussing Western disturbance, that when you have the time of sowing of the wheat crop, at the time of planting or the sowing of the wheat crop, some amount of moisture is required, some amount of rainfall is required. At the time of harvesting, you need absolute dry conditions, bone dry conditions. Okay. So, in those situations, when you need those bone dry conditions during March, April, if there's a heat wave, excessive hot conditions, the crop will die. Many of the crops will die. Now, in 2022, due to climate change, the month of March itself observed India experiencing heat waves. Much of that crop was destroyed. But also due to climate change, what is happening is now the events of Western disturbances, which would cease to exist after the month of February and early part of March. Now these Western disturbances brought rainfall that are prevalent and observed in the northern part of the country till May and even further. So whenever you have that unseasonal rains in the later part of March or April, many of the standing wheat crops, they get destroyed. So climate change is influencing wheat, is even influencing rice production. Because earlier what used to happen, June, at the end of the June, water would be received in the fields, you plant rice. Nowadays, June is dry. So people are delaying that sowing of rice till July. And July is excessively receiving very high amount of rainfall, flooding various areas. Again, you cannot plant crops under that condition. So there is loss of acreage, and also in many of the areas, that loss of crop productivity also. Okay. Are these tandoors made from wheat? No, my dear friend. Look at a tandoor. Tandoor is made up of bricks and soil and mud. Wheat, I was referring to the various different types of wheat based bread that you bake in the tandoor ovens. Okay. Is boro a type of rice? Yes. Then paddy can be classified uh, in three categories in Kharif, Zaid, and Rabi? No. Why it is not classified into these three categories is because it takes a longer growing period as compared to the Zaid season, and it will require moist conditions and warmer conditions to grow. It won't grow in cold conditions, hence not Rabi. Okay, it is just that the region of the Coromandel coast, eastern coastline, they will receive rainfall during the month of December. That makes the situation ideal for the growth of rice. Okay. Shreyas, what about millets? What about millets, my dear friend? Or are you having that FOMO feeling that rice and wheat they're talking about, they're not talking about millets? Is that, or do you have a question associated? Okay, it was a FOMO feeling then. So when we say, or when we talk about millets, millets have traditionally been very, very important, or have not only been very important, but very relevant for crop cultivation, at least in the subcontinent. Historically, for thousands of years, millets have been grown in this area. In fact, before the Green Revolution, one of the major crops, most major widespread crops grown in our country would be millets. Now, millets are of various different types, major millets, minor millets, etc. Amongst the major millets, the types of millets that you grow in India are jowar, bajra, and ragi, or sorghum, finger millets, and pearl millets. Now, these are what are also referred to as the poor farmer's friend. Why? Because when you have, or when you grow these millets, first of all, any kind of soil condition, they will tend to grow. They don't require absolutely fertile soil. They don't require too much of care. They don't have that much tantrums with them. Very easy to grow. They are rain-fed crops. Give them rainfall, they are good to go. They are not those touchy crops that provide me rainfall also, provide me irrigation also, And just so that I don't feel left out, give me fertilizer also. They don't require any of these tantrums. Leave them as they are, they grow. They are climate change resilient. That impacts of vagaries of climate change doesn't impact the growth of millets. Plus, they are much more nutritious as compared to rice and wheat, much highly more nutritious. So, these millets will give you fiber, calcium, iron, vitamins, various different types of nutrients it will give you. Enrich your body with that. Rice and wheat don't give you that much amount of nutrients. So, for a country like India, which has got a large number of malnourished population, millets are a significant godsend. To add on to that, the residues of these millets, they can also be used as fodder for feeding the animals. So from the same farmland, you can take care of your own nutrition, you can take care of the requirement of the animals also. That is why also referred to as the poor farmer's friend. Okay, so jowar, bajra and ragi, the most important millets grown in India. Now, jowar basically, when you talk about jowar, to be grown in the region of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Madhya Pradesh, mostly grown in the moist areas. It is a kharif crop. Okay, this is what a crop of jowar looks like. You would also have seen it in your day-to-day life. You would have seen that. Many of the people mistake it for maize in its early stage or wheat in its early stage, but it is jowar. Okay, it is also very highly nutritious for the human health. Then you have bajra. Bajra, what is also known as pearl millet, this is bajra. This is what is known as the pearl millet, is a coarse grain, and that grows in areas where the annual rainfall is between 40 to 60 centimeter. That is where the annual rainfall is between 40 to 60 centimeter. Okay, the temperature required for the cultivation can be wide ranging, 20 to 30, even 32, 33 degrees Celsius. Bajra will grow. Major bajra producing states: Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, the dry areas there. So, in this kind of rainfall, what kind of forests grow? Thorn forests, isn't it? The thorny forests grow here. So, that is where you will have the growth of bajra. It can also be used as valuable animal fodder. So, slowly and steadily, these crops are now being adopted in wider areas. Okay, but when we talk about any state which is producing that crop, it has to be a good chunk of production carried out from that state. Okay, then you have ragi. In hilly conditions where the soil is not very good, any different type of soil, ragi can be grown. So it is a crop of dry region, grows well on red, black, sandy, loamy, shallow, black soil everywhere. Rich in iron, calcium, and other micronutrients, and even fibers or roughages. Major ragi producing states: Karnataka, which has done tremendous amount of work. That is something that you have to appreciate. Karnataka, again, by the same logic, if you look at the staple food, ragi is a mainstay. The ragi mudde or the ragi balls, that is the mainstay of the food item. Now, what Karnataka has done, rather than relying on the same kind of ragi consumed everywhere, Karnataka has diversified the product. With the help of the state support, multiple different food processing centers have evolved. And this has been done by various successive governments, right? So that is where the role of bureaucracy and administration, by the way, comes in. They have that foresightedness to implement these. So you will get ragi chips, you will get other food items made out of ragi. What they are doing is they are thereby diversifying the product base. When you diversify the product base, you will always increase the demand. So the farmers get adequate amount of income. The problem with millets is that demand across the country is not very high. That is why, in order to have that universal demand, applicable across the country so that everybody seeks to have that kind of a demand for these millets. That is why you basically had a situation where the government did endeavor significantly to declare 2023 as the International Year of Millets. Why was it done? In order to raise the awareness so that many people, for that matter, if you talk about agriculture to any normal student now, here also you would have seen, even when rice and wheat is talked about, people talk about millets. They might not have consumed millets in their life, they talk about Shriyan. What has this done? It has increased the level of awareness. Once that awareness level increases, thereby a demand is created in the market. People will go to buy those products. And once the producers are aware that these products are in demand, the farmers will get a better price. The farmers will be encouraged to produce millets. And when the farmers are encouraged to produce millets, it will be sustainable. Not much water is required, not much chemical fertilizers are required. Beneficial for the farmers, also low cost of production. So that is the entire purpose of creating that demand. Okay, so Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, in almost all the hilly areas, you'll find that ragi, which is also the finger millet, the reddish appearance, that is what is observed as ragi. Then maize. If you talk about maize, maize is basically a crop which grows in the temperature requirement of around 21 to 27, 28 degrees Celsius. And the largest producer of maize in the world is United States, manages to produce almost 25% of the global production of maize in itself. Now, maize is one of those crops where significant amount of utilization of the crop products are done. For example, maize is used to produce starch, artificial sugar in many of the cases, packaging materials. It is used as fodder also. It is used to manufacture alcoholic beverages also. So that is where maize has got multiple different utilities, multiple different types of utilities. So major maize producing states are Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Madhya Pradesh. Major maize produce. Nowadays, even in Punjab also, some areas they have started growing maize, but that is not a major producing area. Okay, so unless and until you carry out that value addition to the food item, the demand will stagnate. That is why one of the issues in Indian agriculture, why everybody has got a low level of income, is because of lack of value addition to the food. In US, 25% of the global maize production is from US. In US, you don't come across the multiple of these stories that the farm income has plummeted, because that diversification, that value addition is done. It is for that purpose that establishment of food parks, mega food parks across the country, is indeed the need of the hour. So that not only, for example, wheat, not only grains of wheat and wheat flour, not only that is sold, various different products made out of wheat, when that is sold, then you will have more number of people getting interested. So when more people are interested, demand supply curve, there will be better income for the farmers. Pulses. Pulses form a very important form of our diet, from north to south, from east to west. That forms a very important part of our diet. You will find in some or the other form, pulses are consumed. Why? Because largely the diet in the subcontinent, in our country at least, largely the diet is vegetarianism. Now, by vegetarian, I don't mean that people don't consume non-veg food. Okay, so please don't start pinpointing here, but I consume non-veg, fair enough. But again, I always use the same reference. If you consider 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks in a year, majority of the times, and majority of the food items that you consume would always end up being vegetarian, right? Even rice is vegetarian for that matter. So majority of our food is vegetarian throughout the year. Pulses form an important source of protein. Other important source of protein are few of the nuts, groundnut, for example, and even soybean. But that is not very easily available and is pricey also. So pulses are consumed in large proportions. Now, India is amongst the largest producers and consumers of pulses across the world. Largest producer and consumer of the pulses across the world. So major sources of protein, various different varieties of pulses are grown. This is also a rain-fed crop, doesn't require much of an irrigation. Whenever the prices of pulses or the production of pulses fluctuate in India, that can lead to significant price fluctuation. Historically has led to change in government also due to the pulse prices. Okay, so that is where these pulses, they are important. Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, all of them, they produce pulses. Now, many of the states have joined in. Many of the states are producing pulses. These are beneficial for retaining and recharging the fertility of the soil as well. Significantly beneficial. Okay. We'll take a look at sugarcane. Before that, we take a break. And after the break, we come back and we take a look at this portion. So we take a break. Yes, Ankush, correct. That is the requirement that I need out of you guys, the interlinkage. So what Ankush has said is Coal Rebellion and Munda Rebellion happened due to the Britishers imposed high tax on millets also. That is correct, in fact. Pihu, in multi-cropping, different crops need different temperatures and rain and climate. So how is it? So you grow those kind of crops which have a similarity in conditions. You don't irrigate the entire area with the same amount of water. Okay. That is why not any vegetable or any crop you go. You have very selected combinations that you use. So let's take a break and let's be back. Now we come to the crop of sugarcane. So sugarcane is referred to as a subtropical crop grown in the tropics and even beyond. So if you take a look at the requirement for the cultivation of sugarcane, it is close to around 21 to 27 degrees Celsius. That is the ideal condition for the growth of sugarcane. Annual rainfall again is close to around 100 centimeter of annual rain is an absolute must for the growth of sugarcane. Now, historically, sugarcane in our country has been traditionally grown in the areas of Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Bihar, Maharashtra. Those are the historical areas or the traditional areas where sugarcane cultivation has been carried out. But for the past couple of decades or the past decade and a half, there has been a marked shift of the sugarcane cultivation from northern part of the country to the southern part of the country. And that is a trend which is quite substantial. Areas of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, portions of Kerala, they are also now growing sugarcane in larger quantities. And there is a distinct advantage, Maharashtra also. There's a distinct advantage when you grow sugarcane in the southern part of the country as compared to the northern part of the country. What are the advantages? First of all, look at the conditions required. Conditions required, if you observe 21 to 27 degrees Celsius of temperature and around 100 centimeter of rainfall. Now, these conditions are ideally prevalent where? In the southern to the south of the tropics. In the northern part of the country, these temperatures, they are maintained only for around 7-8 months. In the southern part of the country, around 10 to 11 months, you have the same condition. So in the southern part of the country, you have longer growing season. Longer growing season. When the crops, they grow in these suitable conditions in the southern part, thereby they will always have a higher sucrose content as well. Sucrose is the sugar content, right? So the sugar cane basically in the grown typically in Karnataka, etc., you'll find that the sugar content of that is high. So higher sucrose content. Then after that, you will also come across a scenario or a situation where basically you will observe that for this sugarcane, you will come across a scenario that it is a crop which requires significant amount of post-production processing. Sugarcane is largely utilized for manufacturing of jaggery, sugar, etc. Right? So there is significant amount of post-production processing which is required. Processing infrastructure is always and traditionally has been much better in the southern part of the country as compared to the north. The farm to market connectivity, the roads are better, the electricity supply is much more reliable, right? So better processing infrastructure, processing infra. In general, the infrastructure is better. The organizations, the mills, the operation part is much more streamlined in the southern part as compared to northern part. Better operational standards. Standards. So because of this, you have or we all have witnessed a shift of the sugarcane cultivation, a gradual shift in sugarcane areas from north India to south India. a gradual shift in sugarcane areas from North India to South India. Now, when we talk about this sugarcane cultivation, you will basically observe that sugar is the main product, main byproduct of it. Other than that, you have the sugar is the main manufacturing outcome of it. Other than, you will have, for example, jaggery that is also produced, and the byproducts are molasses, bagasse. These are the byproducts. These can be used for packaging industry, for manufacturing of various different packaging systems, fibers, and also they can be used for manufacturing of biofuel. That is where the government has been trying to bring about a mandatory ethanol blending of petrol and ethanol blending of various different fossil fuel, because ethanol is something which can be produced from bagasse and molasses, so that if the farmers, they get a utilization of even these waste products generated out of sugarcane, their income can always increase. India and Brazil are the largest producers of sugarcane across the world. Okay. Major sugarcane producing centers are Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Bihar, Punjab, Haryana. But the traditional shift has been happening from north to south. Then we come across plantation crops. Plantation crops are those kinds of crops which are grown in very large areas. A single type of crop is grown. All the attention is paid for the healthy, well-being and well-managed crop cultivation. Now, these plantation crops, if you will observe, these plantation crops, you have rubber plantation also, you have coconut plantation also, which is done. You have oil palm plantation also, which is done. Tapioca also, for that matter, cashew nut also, erica nut also. But amongst the plantation crops, you will observe that the most predominant amongst them are tea and coffee. These are the most predominant of the plantation crops. You have tea and coffee. Tea and coffee cultivation, these are the major plantation crops. Now, here for both tea and coffee, you will observe that a certain set of requirements are there. First of all, for tea, rainfall higher than 150 centimeter per year, an average rainfall of more than 150 centimeter per year is required. Then after that, basically, you will also observe that temperature in the range of roughly around 21 to 28 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature requirement. No standing water. So this much high amount of rainfall, but water should not stagnate in an area. You should not have the stagnation of water. So why? Because whenever in these plants, if you have standing water, immediately fungal growth is something which is observed, and the roots, they begin to rot. The roots, they get destroyed. So that is why the only areas where they can grow significantly well is across the slopes, across the hill slopes, where the rainfall will also be very high, but water will not be standing also. So grows well in the hill slopes. Well across slopes. Now, in this case, if we say it grows well across the slopes, now the regions where you will find tea is cultivated. Now, in the regions where you find this tea to be cultivated, you have, let's suppose, the regions of northeastern states, Assam included, northern West Bengal, portions of Himachal, and the Nilgiri areas, Nilgiris. That is the contiguous zone in the region of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. So, the region around Ooty, for example, lot of tea cultivation, lot of tea gardens. That is something which you will observe here. Okay. Now, for coffee, almost similar conditions for coffee. Here, by the way, by northeastern states and West Bengal, we are talking about the mountainous areas, the foothills of Himalayas, etc. In case of coffee, again, rainfall higher than 150 centimeter per year. Temperature in the range of 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. Again, no standing water, grows well along slopes. Now, one major differentiating factor between the conditions of tea and coffee, other than the temperature requirement, is also the fact that while tea gardens, if you would have observed, you have large tea gardens across the slopes, they handle direct sunlight also. Coffee plant cannot handle direct sunlight. So they grow well in the shade of other big trees or plants. So that is why in the case of the coffee plantation, if you do visit a coffee plantation, you will always observe that from a far away distance, it will appear like a forested area, dense trees. But then if you look carefully at the base of these trees, you will have these coffee crops which have been planted, right? So does not handle. Is not able to handle direct sunshine. Okay, it is not able to handle direct sunshine, so grows well in shade. Well in shade. Now, the regions. So here, the region of Nilgiris in the area of Karnataka. The Kodagu district, for example, the region of Coorg, that is where you will have a lot of these coffee plantations. Karnataka, Kerala. These are the major coffee growing areas. And then also Tamil Nadu, the region around Tamil Nadu. These are the traditional coffee growing areas of the country. Then after that, here, amongst the plantation crops, these are the major ones. We come across another category of crops that are regarded as the fiber crops. That is the type of crops from where, from the crop extract or from the final crop product, you are able to extract some fabrics or some fiber. For example, cotton, jute, right? Even for that matter, hemp. Hemp is basically extracted from the cannabis plant, which grows as a weed in moist areas. So from those plants also, fiber is extracted. Coconut also sometimes is used. The raw coconut, the basic ripened coconut, the outer husk of it is utilized to manufacture ropes and fabrics also, fibers also. But the most widespread utilization is in the case of cotton and jute. Now, cotton requires a temperature of roughly around 45, roughly around 25 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. Even if the temperature exceeds up till 35 degrees Celsius, cotton crop is not hampered. Is a kharif crop, grows well in black soil and alluvial soil. In black and alluvial soil. Then after that, you will observe that basically when you have this cotton, then rainfall, they don't require very high amount of rainfall, roughly around 70 centimeter. Frost should not develop on the ground. So temperature should not fall to freezing levels. Temperature should never fall to freezing levels. Takes around 200 to 210 days to mature. Regions. Which are the regions? Deccan Trap, even some portions of Malwa Plateau, the region of Gujarat also, portion of Punjab, portions of Andhra Pradesh, in these areas, you will generally find cotton cultivation to be very prominent. Deccan Traps here, the region around, they roughly represent the region around Maharashtra, some portions of Gujarat, some portions of Madhya Pradesh, some portions of northern Karnataka, that is represented by them. In Punjab and Andhra Pradesh, you will observe across the alluvial soil areas, cotton is cultivated. Jute. Jute is one of those crops which requires very high rain. Temperature, again, in the range of 25 degrees Celsius to 32 degrees Celsius. Rainfall in excess of 150 centimeter per year. Then after that, you will observe grows well in fresh alluvium. Okay, that is Khadar soil. So in the floodplains, regions where they are grown, this will also take around 6 to 7 months of growing period. This also has got 6 to 7 months of growing period. In fact, more suitable or more accurate would be then regions in eastern part of India, Assam, West Bengal, Bihar, eastern part of Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, parts of Andhra Pradesh. These are the areas where jute is also cultivated in significant quantity. Okay, so cotton and jute, both of them, they are referred to largely in the category of fiber crops. Another particular fabric or fiber is silk. Now, silk is produced by the rearing of silkworms. Now, when we talk about these silkworms, they are chiefly responsible for the production of silk. So, what these silkworms do? They wrap around themselves a cocoon-like structure. Okay, so these silkworms, when you breed these silkworms, you basically feed them huge amount of leaves which they consume almost equal to their body weight, and almost double the body weight is the amount of leaves that they consume in the initial period. Then they wrap themselves in a cocoon where their body metamorphoses into the adult fly. But it is at that stage of cocoon, when the cocoon develops, that is when these cocoons, they are put into boiling water, and thereby very slowly these cocoons are unwrapped and silk is derived, silk is extracted. That is what is also referred to as sericulture. Now, sericulture is one of the very important economic activities, particularly in those smaller areas in the hill regions of the country: Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Telangana. Now, the entirety of the silk industry provides employment to more than 60 lakh people, direct and indirect source of employment. So it is a major sector. Now, this silk, the quality of the silk produced is also dependent on the quality of leaves that the silkworms consume. That determines the quality of silk produced. So there, based upon that basis, you have the classification as mulberry, tussar, muga, and eri silk. These are the four major varieties of silk that you have. So when we talk about, let's suppose each one of them are produced in India. Mulberry. This is the most predominant variety of silk, mulberry. It is derived after the silk. Why the name is there? Because this is the silk which is mostly derived after the silkworms are fed with the mulberry leaves. And this mulberry silk is the most widespread used silk in terms of production of various different apparels, various different types of clothes, etc. That is where you will find the mulberry silk to be of maximum usage, of maximum utility. Okay, majorly for manufacturing of apparels, the clothing apparels, the clothes that you have. So here, this is by far the most predominant variety of silk produced in India. Almost more than half of the silk produced in the country is of mulberry variety. Then you have the tussar silk. Tussar is also, before that, let us see Muga silk. Muga silk is also what is known as the royal silk. Muga is what is also known as royal silk. Traditionally and historically grown in the region of Assam, this is also used to manufacture clothing, apparels, etc. But hereby, this royal silk is the one which is utilized for, let's suppose, it has historically and traditionally been used for clothing the royals of the Ahomian households. Right, in the Assamese culture, the royal families would always use this silk, and hence the name royal silk. Very difficult to maintain. It will have that pale whitish kind of an appearance, but it is a very lush variety of silk, traditionally again used for apparels. Then you have the tussar silk. Tussar is also what is known as the wild silk. Why? Because in this case, silkworms are fed with almost any kind of leaves, right? Any and every kind of leaves you feed them. So obviously the variety of silk that gets generated is not of the best quality. Okay, so traditionally this has been used for interior decorations, furnishings, furniture items, etc. But nowadays, as the processing infrastructure has significantly improved, and now we are staring at a better processing infrastructure, nowadays you will observe that this Tasar silk is used for apparels also. Nowadays, as in for some time now, this is used for dressing apparels as well. Then you have the eri silk or the inadi silk. So this eri silk is also what is known as the peace silk, because this is the only variety or the only type of silk production where you don't kill the silkworms in the process of production. So that is why known as the peace silk. This is also used for manufacturing of shawls, of stoles, etc. Not of that good a variety as maybe a mulberry or a muga, but it is also quite pricey out there in the market. So these are the varieties of silk. Now here, if you observe these areas, the hilly regions where the social indicators are not very good, where the economic parameters are not very good. Now in these areas, you will observe these are the regions where you have a significant potential for silk production in our country. Significant potential for silk production. Other economic processes might not have taken off in these regions. So, as a course or as a kind of an action to increase the overall productivity or the overall economic income of these areas, silk production can always be touted as or can always be given as a way out, as an example whereby this is this can be used, sericulture can be used to bring about economic benefit and economic upliftment of the people living in these hilly regions of eastern and northeastern part of the country. So whenever you get questions across the portions of GS paper 1 in the portions of the society, and even in GS paper 2, about those tribal areas of the country, about the regions where you have the socially and economically backward sections of the people living in, how to improve their conditions, you can always factor in the influence of events such as sericulture or activities such as sericulture, beekeeping, etc., which can work tremendously to improve their overall income. Okay. Now, tea grows in hilly areas and is not supported by stagnant water. So, can we say that terrace farming is bad for growing tea? No, not always. In terrace farming, also, you provide that drainage system. Terrace farming, unless and until you are cultivating rice where you allow the water to accumulate, other than that, you will allow the water to flow if you are growing tea. Ever if you visit a tea garden, you will observe that you have small patches and there is a flow of water which is allowed from all around it. Okay, so that water does not stagnate. Pihu, why is jute expensive, more expensive than cotton? Overall, because of the entire production process is much more complicated in the case of jute. Then when we talk about jute, we still use very older methods of the production of the textile. The looms are still very, very old. That is why the Indian jute mills are dying. Basically, still they operate on machineries of pre-independence days, whereas Bangladesh, which was a major jute producing area of pre-partition India, that region of Bangladesh has brought in newer methods of production, market-based control, and that is where their jute industry has significantly taken off. That is where you will find the irony that today many of the Indian producers of grains, etc., they import Bangladeshi jute bags because they are cheaper. Right. In our country, what happened was that majority of the jute textile mills were present in the region around West Bengal. And West Bengal experienced a series of deindustrialization, the phase of deindustrialization, which spanned for multiple decades, where majority of the industries from the region of West Bengal, they migrated out. Because of various labor laws, etc., many of them are still very prevalent in West Bengal, due to which upgradation of machinery, better methods of production, etc., was never the key principal area. The core area was, or the core concern area was, that let's protect this industry. You had the various labor unions, etc. So there is a very nice article which was written about how labor unions have the exact article was that labor unions have trapped the jute industry in a bag. So, because jute is used for manufacturing of gunny bags. So, there were these frequent agitations, hartals, bands, etc., due to which market forces were not allowed. See, when you allow the market forces to come in, supply and demand curve to operate naturally, automatically those which are unfit for meeting that global standards, they start getting weeded out. So what should be done in developing nations is that government provides support to those budding industries or those industries which don't have the money to get the modern machinery. But at the same time, the support should be in the help that the government gets them the modern machinery. What has happened in the case of the jute industry was that the support which was uh, granted, or which was asked by the West Bengal immediately after independence, was in the form of financial grants. And those financial grants, they began to be channelized in the jute sector. So always the mill owners would get large amount of money, and the production process would still be stalled. And foreign manufactured jute or Bangladeshi jute was not allowed to protect this industry. As a result of that, what happened? When you protect an industry for a very long period of time, it goes on becoming inefficient and inefficient, and that is where the inefficiency crept in. Okay, now we come to irrigation. What is irrigation? So irrigation is the artificial supply of water for the cultivation of crops, not the supply of rainfall. Artificial supply of water for crop cultivation. So the process of irrigation goes back thousands of years. And irrigation has got the potential to significantly improve the crop productivity, significantly increase the overall production. That is there in the case of irrigation. Okay, so that is the factor in irrigation here. Now, when we talk about irrigation in general, basically, you can divert the river water, excess amount of rainfall you can store somewhere, you can extract water from wells and tube wells. There have been various methodologies of carrying out irrigation. Irrigation carried out in a region is always a sum product of the local topography. For example, in a region such as the Peninsula Plateau, where you have very hard rocks, digging a tube well can be very costly and a very arduous process for that matter. Right? It will be a difficult task to dig a deep bore well into the region of this Peninsula Plateau. So in these areas, tube well irrigation is not so prominent. But in the region of Indo-Gangetic Plains, where you will find that the groundwater level is very close to the surface, 20 feet, 30 feet below the surface, and you have sedimentary soil, digging of tube wells is an easier task. So tube wells would be dominating that area. Similarly, construction of canals. Construction of canals is much easier across the sedimentary region as compared to the hard igneous rock of the Peninsula Plateau. For example, if let's suppose we talk about construction of tanks. Tanks are what? You basically store water, excess water from a river flow or excessive water from the rainfall. You store it in a tank. That is where tanks are, that is what tanks are for, isn't it? That is the purpose of tanks. Now, when you have hard rocks at the bottom, Peninsula Plateau, there storing water is much easier because water will not percolate beneath the rocks. You will simply need some stones and bricks and you can construct a tank. But if the same tank you are constructing in the region of, let's suppose, in Uttar Pradesh or a Bihar or a West Bengal, you need to ensure that the water doesn't seep down. underground because you have sedimentary soil. So topography is a much important factor in terms of what is the methodology of irrigation followed. Now, pre-independence, immediately pre-independence, and after post-independence also, up till 1960s, canal irrigation would be the mainstay of Indian irrigation system. Canal irrigation would be followed. Canal irrigation would be pursued. Okay, that would be the mainstay. Now, it was found out that this is a very costly process. There are a lot of inefficiencies, bureaucracy is involved, administration, lot of administrative inefficiencies, corruption. It takes a long period of time to build a canal. And there also, after construction of a canal, a lot of that water is lost by evaporation. So a continuous, reliable water supply is also not something that you can maintain. So that is why the canal irrigation from 60s onwards started taking a backseat. And the farmers, they started installing tube wells. Because with the case of the tube wells, you can install it, you can dig it out in your own farm. You don't need to be dependent on the government that, okay, the government will build the canal, I will get the supply of the canal, then I will get the water. You have your own right to dig out anywhere. So tube well irrigation started becoming predominant. Today, majority of the irrigated areas of the country, they are catered to by the tube well irrigation. But nowadays, in order to conserve water, modern methods of irrigation have also come in. And amongst these modern methods of irrigation, we have the sprinkler and the drip irrigation. Most of you would be aware about what is sprinkler and drip. So sprinkler irrigation. You would have seen the sprinklers in the gardens, various different gardens, where you have the small sprinkler from where water is sprayed on all sides. It mimics the situation of a natural rainfall. So here, let's suppose this is the sprinkler system. Now this sprinkler from here, you will have water which is sprayed over, which is supplied. In all different parts. So by this, you are able to conserve a lot of water. A lot of amount of water, which ideally in the methods of irrigation is wasted. By this sprinkler, the problem of over irrigation goes out of the window. And you are replicating the conditions of a natural rainfall, so the plants will also be happy. Right? Then you have the drip irrigation. In drip irrigation, what is done? In the case of drip irrigation, basically, yes, drop by drop application of water is done. So here, the basic principle is that, look, in any place, if you have plants, it is the roots of the plants which require the water, not the soil in between them. The roots of the plants are the ones which require substantial amount of water. Okay. The soil in between them, little amount of moisture will also do. So the basic principle is that across the entirety of the farmland, you have a pipeline which is laid. You have a pipeline network which is laid. and perforations are made on these pipelines. Okay. You have this pipeline network which is laid, and perforations are made, due to which drop by drop it starts going into the region of the roots. Drop by drop it goes into the roots. Now the benefit of this is that you can have a centralized system by which what is done is that immediately after you plant the seeds, the network of pipeline is laid, which continues to exist till you harvest the crop, right? So there you also have another added benefit, that let's suppose you have some of the fertilizers which are soluble in water. You can mix those fertilizers and then supply the fertilizers through these pipelines. They will be applied more efficiently directly where they are required. Not all the fertilizers are soluble, only those which are soluble. That is something which you can use. So that is a process which is referred to as fertigation. Fertigation. Fertigation basically means irrigation plus fertilizer application. Only those fertilizers soluble in water can be applied by this medium, but you attain greater efficiency. Many of the horticultural crops, vegetables for example, Ankush has given an example of cabbage, multiple different fruit varieties also. They will grow well, or they grow well in this condition of drip irrigation. Drip irrigation slowly and steadily is being installed across the widespread region of the country. Drip irrigation is being installed. Okay, this does tremendous work to conserve water. Per drop, more crop. That principle, that slogan called by the government, that also stands to be applicable if we apply this case of drip irrigation. Bamboo drip irrigation is also one of the traditional methods of drip irrigation. Yes, Anjan, correct. So that is the case of irrigational practices. Now here, different sources of irrigation are used depending upon the topography of the land. So rainfall, availability of surface or groundwater, nature of rivers, requirements of crops, etc. These are the various different sources of irrigation. Okay. The main sources of irrigation used in different paths: wells and tube wells, canals, tanks, and other ones. Most predominant method of irrigation in the country as of now is the tube well irrigation. More than 46% of the irrigation is carried out by tube wells itself. By the way, I hope we are aware that overall across the country, you still have close to around 50% of the land which does not have irrigation. Around more than 50% of the land has no access to irrigation. So that is one reason for the lower crop productivity across the country. Because unless and until you provide water to the crops when it is required rather than when it rains, so the productivity will always decrease. That is why increasing the sources of irrigation, taking irrigation to the last farm, that is a must in terms of increasing the overall production and productivity of the crops in the country. Okay. Now, then comes wells and tube wells. So when we talk about wells and tube wells here, basically a well is a hole dug in the ground to obtain. So I hope we are aware of the difference, right? So a well basically is where you have a simple hole dug into the ground where you extract water from the groundwater level. With the mechanical force, you extract that water. Tube well is where you fix a motor. Much smaller hole is required. You fix a motor, a pipe, and that electrical power is converted into mechanical power, suction power, and that pulls out the water, right? So here, when we talk about the distribution of wells and tube wells, mostly dominated in the northern part of the country, and that too in the region of the green revolution areas, you'll find very significant predominance of wells and tube wells. Okay. Canals, they used to be the most important source of irrigation up till the 1960. After that, the canal irrigation method, that basically started taking a backseat. So basically, why? Because if you look at these canals, these divert the water from a dam or from a river channel. Now here, availability of water can be highly seasonal. During the rainy season, the water in the canals will be significantly present, and during the dry season, the water level will go down. Lot of water is also lost in these canals as a result or as a consequence of evaporation. So due to that evaporation, lot of water is consistently lost from these canals. Okay, that is always the case. Now, that is why, and it is a very, very expensive process. For example, the region of Bihar, historically, on paper, and it was by various different audits that it was found out, on paper, between the 1980s and the 2000s, Bihar apparently on paper constructed many of these canals. And what they would say is that, look, we had constructed a canal, a flood came, and now the entire region has been flooded by silt deposit, and that is why the canal is not visible. So on paper, the canals were constructed. In reality, politicians and the administration in cahoot, they managed to extract a significant and a substantial sum of money. Right? So that is the case of the canals. For example, in UP, you have the East Saryu Canal. You would have heard about the name. Now, that Saryu Canal, the construction of it, the process of it began in the late 70s. It was finally inaugurated in the year 2022. And that is what I always give as an example to the students. That think about it. In order to construct one canal, we can take almost up till 40 years. Shah Jahan took only 22 years to construct Taj Mahal, which became the wonder of the world. We are taking more than 40 years to construct a canal. So imagine the number of coffers that it would have filled, the number of pockets that this canal would have filled, the construction of it. So the widespread corruption involved is one of the reasons why nowadays large canal construction is not given that permission, or that project is in itself is not sanctioned. Because the entire logic of irrigation, the entire principle behind irrigation has shifted from one centralized irrigation source, it has shifted to a decentralized method. That in your own local area, go for micro irrigation, drip setup, install that drip setup, have the rainwater harvesting, store that excess water, use that. Okay, so that is the benefit associated with the micro level of irrigation. After all, it was only in the audits carried out in the 2000s, early 2000s, when it was found out the massive level of corruption which has happened in the name of canal construction across the country. People have made billions in the name of canal construction. Earlier, what used to be the case is that at the time of presentation of budget, there would be a significant amount of pressure that for two things. One, that announce a railway train to my constituency or my area, so, or a stoppage of a train to my area, or my region should have a major train like a Rajdhani or a Duranto should stop there. So that was one of the major demands that would be always floated during the budget. And second would be canal. Now, both of them would be a significant money minting machine. Right. So that is the case with canal irrigation. Now, the main canal irrigated areas are in the northern plains of India, where Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Rajasthan, Bihar, they account for majority because of the case of the sedimentary plains. Now, here, Gujarat actually did something very innovative. The problem with canal was a lot of water would be lost as a result of evaporation. So, what Gujarat did, those of you belonging from that area or those of you who have visited that region, you will observe that there the Gujarat is practically very dry, receiving very little amount of rainfall. The rivers, they oftentimes they run at a very low level, but observe the canals in Gujarat, significantly present with water. Why? In many of the areas in Gujarat, what the administration, the bureaucracy has done, they have covered that top portion with solar panels. Think about it. Covering the top with solar panels. It will solve twin purpose. First of all, it will prevent that evaporation from happening. And secondly, the amount of heat received, that can be used for generation of electricity. So such kind of innovative practices, that can go a long way for us in order to increase the productivity of cultivation and also in order to make agriculture more sustainable. Okay, so see these kind of case studies and examples when you come across in your region also, you would have come across these kind of innovative practices that the bureaucracy brings in. For this, the credit should always and does always go to the bureaucracy. They have the foresightedness for this. So that is where when somebody asks you, and this is a pet question of UPSC in the interview, why do you want to enter the bureaucracy? This should be the ideal example and the answer, that innovative solutions to the nation's problem is the key to the progress in the future. And you can say that I, as an individual, have got that solution finding or the knack to find solutions rather than pointing problems. So these kind of answers when you give, rather than the very typical answers that every candidate blabbers out in the interview, why do you want it to enter into civil services? From childhood days itself, when I was 3 years old, I wanted to serve the society. My parents saw in the stars that this person will be a big uh, uh, servant of the society. When I see poor people, my heart cries. So I want to serve the society. That is why I want to enter into civil services. The interview panel literally gets bored by these answers. Everybody delivers the same answers, right? So don't deliver these answers. Have that kind of an innovation. If you think about these from now, that is how you prepare eventually for that merit list, right? Now, the tank irrigation. Tank consists of water storage, which has been developed by constructing a small bund of earth or stones across a stream. So you store the excess water and then you use it for cultivating of or providing irrigation to the farmlands, etc. So here, water impounded by the bund is used for irrigation and other purposes. Tank irrigation is popular in the Peninsular Plateau because the storage of water is much easier there because of the hard rock structure. So very prominent in the region of Telangana in particular, Andhra Pradesh, etc. Here also, an innovative scheme which was brought by the Telangana government, the previous government, obviously. The innovative scheme that they brought under the aegis of Mission Kakatiya. Now, what they did was that they encouraged people to have more tanks, right? So as to have rainwater harvesting, etc., to bring about a water security, because Telangana is, again, just like Gujarat, a very dry state. Okay. To add on to that, they said that, look, we will also help the farmers, or we'll help you guys in carrying out pisciculture. So in the water that you are storing in the tanks, why don't you rear prawns, shrimps, and small fishes? So that you can sell that in the market and generate revenue out of it. Right? From the fishes, etc., you will get the or some of the organic matter also, the waste you can use for manufacturing of manures also. So such kind of innovative measures always go a long way in solving the ultimate problem of low farm income. Okay? Should we speak truth before the interview panel? A very innocent question I have. Depending upon what your truth is, right? So that is very, very important, because many of the people have got the reality that immediately after they clear the examination, you will find them negotiating very good deals, lucrative deals, that okay, give me this much amount of money, I will tell whatever you want, etc., etc., give me a trip to Europe or this particular country. And people go on foreign trips also immediately after clearing the exam. So if that is the truth, if you speak it before the before the interview panel, why do you want to clear the exams? Because immediately after clearing the exams, I can earn rupees 10 lakh a month, I can go to full paid vacation trips in Europe, etc. That is a truth better to hide it up. Okay, but if the truth is really something which is genuine, feel free to speak it up, because the lesser that you are able to bluff, the better it is. But you will find the many examples of the candidates who have managed to bluff their way so convincingly. You have to be convincing enough, whatever it is, you have to be convincing enough. But don't quote me in this manner that that person had said that bluff in front of the interview panel. I never attest to that. So please don't bluff. Be very genuine. Whatever is in the heart, speak it out. Okay. Now, then comes agricultural productivity and efficiency. So here, how do you measure the overall productivity and efficiency in the agricultural setup? When you are growing certain crops, what is the measure that whether you are growing it efficiently or inefficiently? So there, one of the measures that is present is that of cropping intensity. Basic factor is yield per hectare. That is what is the overall produce in the farmland. That is yield per hectare. But other than that, you have another factor, that is cropping intensity. What is that cropping intensity and what is this yield per hectare? So starting with yield per hectare. So basically, it is the overall efficiency of your farmland. Yield per hectare in the regions of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, the so-called most productive areas of the country, there the yield per hectare year after year is declining. As compared to regions such as China and Europe, in India, the productivity is very low because the yield per hectare is very low. Because of various reasons. First of all, majority of the areas in India, they don't receive irrigation. There's lack of crop diversification, and there is lack of high yield variety of seeds available. Lack of proper information about the soil system, the nutrient of the soil. So people apply all the kinds of nutrients and fertilizers that they can. Right. Very small size of the farmland. So people in many of the areas, they are not even able to deploy tractors or the modern machineries. Majority of the farmlands in India, farmers in India are either small or marginal. So their ability to provide modern methods of output is very low. So because of that, yield per hectare productivity in India is very low. Okay. So when you improve these, you go for crop diversification. Soil health card is one of those schemes which will help the people understand what is it exactly that the soil of their region requires. Then, for example, micro irrigation methodologies will be more efficient. So thereby you can improve the yield per hectare of the country. Now, one of the most important methods of measuring the efficiency is the cropping intensity. Cropping intensity, in simplest of the terms, is about the total amount of time that you utilize, or basically how much use you are making of a farmland in one particular year. What is the amount of use that you are bringing to a farmland in one particular year? That is defined as cropping intensity. For example, let's suppose I have a farmland of 1 acre. 1 acre. I have used that 1 acre farmland to grow rice, and that's it. So I've used it only once throughout the year. Right? Now, let's suppose I have used this 1 acre for growth of rice, and I have basically used a 0.75 acre again for the cultivation of, let's suppose, wheat. After rice, I have grown wheat also. So for me, the total area that I have cultivated is what? 1 acre plus 0.75 acre, isn't it? So the total area I've cultivated is what? 1.75 acres. Because in 1 acre, I have grown rice. And again, in the Rabi season, I have used 0.75 acre to grow wheat. So in a way, I have made use of this farmland multiple times in the same year. So the intensity of cropping is higher. So how do you measure the cropping intensity? Cropping intensity is the gross cropped area by the net sown area into 100. So here, for example, gross cropped area represents total area cultivated in an year. Cultivated in 1 year. And net sown area is what? Net sown area is area of the farmland. Okay. So here, in this case, what will be the total cultivated area in 1 year? How do you calculate cropping intensity? Total cultivated area in 1 year will be 1.75. Area of the farmland is how much? 1 acre into 100. So cropping intensity will come out to be 175. Right. So cropping intensity, if it is above 100, means that farmland has been brought to use multiple times in a year. So multiple cropping, whenever it is done in general, cropping intensity is higher. So fertile land, the areas where the land is fertile, there you will find the farmers are able to cultivate multiple crops in the year. So the productivity from the farmland is very high. Okay, so that is basically the case of cropping intensity. So regions of very high cropping intensity, 175, Punjab, Haryana, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, parts of Bihar and UP also. High cropping intensity of 150 to 175, generally in the region of UP, Bihar, Assam, Kerala. Moderate cropping intensity, 125 to 150, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. The hilly areas have very low cropping intensity. Okay, so if you improve this cropping intensity, how do you improve that? Crop rotation, grow different type of crops, grow millets, grow spinach, grow vegetables, grow the type of crops which don't require that much amount of artificial fertilizers, okay, which will also recharge the soil fertility in the long run. The productivity will also, yield per hectare will also improve. Overall efficiency will also improve. Okay, this is one of the old maps for the cropping intensity. These are the regions of the plain areas typically having higher cropping intensity, 150 and above. Okay, these are the areas where you have very fertile alluvial deposits. Khadar soil is very common. Can say it indicates potential of land. Cropping intensity, yes. And also the farming methodology. Now we come to the agro and social forestry. So basically, yesterday while discussing about the forests also, we had come across this particular scenario that the government for a long time had been concerned about increasing the forest cover across the country, increasing the forest and the green cover across the country. So along with that, there has always been a major point of view and a major point of worry for that matter so as to how to increase the farm income. So there comes the very concept of agroforestry. In the case of an agroforestry, what you do, you basically allow the growth of trees in the agricultural farmlands. You observe here. Growth of trees in the agricultural farmland. It has got various and multiple different types of benefits. The benefits associated are it will increase the forest area and restore the ecological balance of that region. Right? Water retention will improve. Groundwater levels will go up in this area because of that tree cover. Okay. Meeting the basic rural needs from the trees, the types of trees that you grow. Many of the times, what the farmers also do is they plant the saplings of trees such as teak. Now, when they will grow, when they will mature, if you sell them, significant amount of money can be made from it, right? So basic needs can be made, better returns, farm income will improve, controlling the amount of pollution. There also, this will play a major role, controlling the amount of pollution which is otherwise spread around, the air pollution, etc. Greenhouse gases will be trapped, so it will be significantly useful even to combat climate change. And then generation of employment, particularly in the rural area, as when it comes to the female population, because you must be aware, and all of you should be aware by now, that in rural areas in particular, the female labor force participation is directly linked with the women empowerment. And that has got to do with the economic rights and economic independence of the woman. Now, if you carry out this process of agroforestry, many of the forest products can then be packaged, processed, and sold in the market. In majority of the areas, you will find that the women of that region, they form self-help groups or SHGs. You would have come across this SHGs in economics in the portion of even the when you would have read about the area about let's suppose the Society of India, you would have come across self-help groups. So majority of the self-help groups across the country are constituted by women. So thereby, women employment finds a potential there. Women labor force participation in India is much lower. The labor force participation of women in our country is around 30%. In China, the country that we love to bash, in China, labor force participation of women is close to around 61%. Our labor force, female labor force participation is close to the levels of Saudi Arabia. So you can think about it. Unless and until you allow that female labor force participation, you promote that female labor force participation, till that point of time, true empowerment is something which is a far-fetched idea. That is where providing them economic opportunities to earn, economic avenues in the rural areas, can be a significant benefit for the women population. Okay. Now, rubber tree is also used in social forestry, yes. Now we come to the Green Revolution. Green Revolution, if we talk about, so Green Revolution, for the first time, this was basically, and we have talked about it earlier also, that Green Revolution is about the increase, substantial increase in the food grain production. A significant and a substantial increase in the food grain production that is associated with the Green Revolution. So how do you do that? How do you attain that substantial increase? By using high yielding variety of seeds, maybe attained by as a result of cross fertilization, very high yielding variety of seeds. Irrigation, use of machines, tractors, harvesters, thrashers. Then irrigation can be possible if you provide electricity, rural electrification, finance, fertilizers in order to augment the soil fertility, usage of pesticides, weedicides, herbicides to control any unwanted growth in the farmland so that only crops will grow. high level of commercialization, that grow crops that you will sell in the market. You earn from that and then you buy your own food. These were the basis. And for this, based upon this, across the world, there has been an increase in the food grain production. It is only lately that we have realized that this green revolution is not always beneficial. It comes with a certain set of limitations also. And the limitations are excessive application of fertilizers has happened, excessive application of chemicals such as pesticides, weedicides, herbicides, excessive irrigation has become a norm, due to which soil is turning saline. Everybody is now concentrating only on the high yielding variety of seeds. So the local indigenous varieties, which are more suited to the local climate, they are getting ignored. So only high yielding variety of seeds, as soon as the climate fluctuation happens, crop failures result. So due to climate change, more crop failures in these high yielding variety of seeds. Right. And after Green Revolution, we have witnessed an overt emphasis on rice and wheat production. So crop diversification has basically been kicked out of the window. You only have rice and wheat, which are being grown, which are being cultivated. So lack of crop diversification. And also, there has been a regional imbalance which has been created. Because Green Revolution, the benefits of it were applied only in certain parts of the country, in the northwestern parts of the country. Eastern and southern part of the country, they were bereft of those particular facilities such as rural electrification. For example, rural electrification. If you are living in the region of West Bengal, in many of the regions of West Bengal, rural areas, they have got electricity, they have received electricity only in the past decade. Same is the case with Bihar also. So you can think that people could not even fathom to operate tube wells. Right? So obviously, there was a significant disparity amongst the farm products and the farm produce. That has brought in the economic disparity. Economic disparity in various parts of the country, that is never good. That is never good for the long-term progress. Okay? So here, when we talk about the Green Revolution, refers to the growth of multiple growth in crop production in the third world countries based upon the use of modern inputs, technology, high yielding variety of seeds, and mechanization, as well as irrigation facilities. This was a term, Green Revolution was a term used by Professor William Gadd in 1958 in a seminar in Washington titled Food Crisis in the Third World Countries. So William Gadd for the first time termed it. Then it was substantiated by Professor Norman Borlaug. So Professor Norman Borlaug, what he did, he developed a high-yielding variety seed by genetic modification and cross-fertilization of the good quality wheat. It was successful in Mexico, and wheat production doubled in a span of 7 years, and self-sufficiency was achieved. It was after this that M.S. Swaminathan, the doyen of Indian agricultural industry, he wanted to bring this setup to India. He invited Norman Borlaug to India as well. But our bureaucracy, as has always been the case, is driven by inertia, was not ready to accept the norms provided by M.S. Swaminathan. So what M.S. Swaminathan did, it is said that in his own backyard, he implemented this methodology. And the increased productivity was then shown to the bureaucrats of the region. And then after that, it was implemented in the areas around the vicinity of the capital, that is New Delhi, wherever these facilities could be provided. That is why Western UP benefited from Green Revolution, whereas Eastern UP was denied the benefit. Because there the facilities, the infrastructure, etc. did not reach. Okay. So the basis of success of Green Revolution was high-yielding variety of seeds, commercialization, use of chemical fertilizers to augment the declining fertility of the soil, irrigation facilities, mechanization, rural electrification, land reforms so that everybody gets a distribution of land, microfinancing, rural credit, use of pesticides, insecticides, and weedicides. Due to this, and due to these methodologies deployed across the country, our overall fruit productivity increased exponentially. But this also brought about certain lacunae and limitations, which we are experiencing now. So, here, listing of that: over emphasis or reliance on high yielding variety seeds, thereby ignoring local indigenous varieties. These are more resilient to variation in climate. These are more resilient to climate change. Then over irrigation or saline soil formation due to over irrigation. Then after that, you have the case of soil degradation due to over application of fertilizers. Then after that, you will observe that you have, let's suppose, overemphasis on food grains, lack of crop diversification. As a result of that, you have the region trapped in the rice wheat cycle. Then regional disparity based upon production. So these are few of the limitations that have come forth in the case of Green Revolution. This is where we'll limit the discussion here today. We'll carry out the discussion further tomorrow. And tomorrow is where we will finish up till the portion of population. Whatever portion is left about mapping and the doubt clearing, that we will conduct in February, most probably in the first week. Okay? Saturday, you won't have a class, no. So, groundwater depletion also you can write. Yes. So, that is where we'll restrict the session here today. We meet again tomorrow. And till that point of time, do take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you and have a good night.